Good morning and welcome to Tulane University. It is my pleasure to introduce our next session, Building a Utility from the Ground Up, the Delta Utilities Story. If time allows, at the end of the session, the panel will take questions submitted by the audience. To submit a question, please scan the QR code located on the screen. Please be sure to silence your cell phones, enjoy the conversation, and please join me in giving a warm welcome to our moderator, Casey Herman, retired energy sector leader with PwC, also a Tulane alum and parent.
Well, thanks everybody for hanging in through Friday morning after a day and a half of great panel presentations. We've got a terrific one here, very relevant for the New Orleans area and for Tulane University, and I'm excited to hear from our friends here at Delta Utilities. I think first I'll say thank you to Delta Utilities for helping to sponsor this event on behalf of Tulane. I know they're thrilled with the relationship, and thank you all for leaning in and helping out on this event. With me, starting on my far left, is Jeremy Turner, who oversees enterprise systems operations and administrative readiness at Delta Utilities. Next to Jeremy is Taryn Brown, who is the Chief Legal Officer for Delta Utilities. And to my immediate left is Tim Poché, who is the CEO of Delta Utilities. So maybe I'll just ask each of you to do a quick introduction and opening comments. And Jeremy, why don't we start with you?
Sure, thanks. Again, Jeremy Turner, Chief Administrative Officer at Delta, primarily responsible for our transition of our two acquisitions that we'll talk about today, and background in oil and gas, primarily EPC, a member of the Shaw Group team back in early 2000s, and then have been with BCP working on portfolio company projects over the last 12 years.
Hi, Taryn Brown. I am the Chief Legal Officer of Delta and a proud Tulane law graduate, 2009. I am originally from this region, but have spent, my family's from this region, but I've spent the last 20 years living in New York, working primarily as a mergers and acquisitions attorney at big law firms, and joined Delta last year. Have been very proud to be part of this company and invest in the city of New Orleans in the greater region. And being that I was in private equity M&A and global strategic M&A, have been part of some of the largest deals in the world, but, and I've seen the same thing happen and occur at Delta, and I've seen a lot of different industries, and it's very exciting now to be part of the energy industry.
Tim?
Thanks, Casey. Casey and I were talking beforehand, but my name is Tim Poché. Our careers really intertwined quite a bit over the last 25, 30 years. I guess I first met Casey in the early 1990s. I started my career at Deloitte here in New Orleans, and like Casey, I was an audit partner for Deloitte in the energy and utility practice. But my career's kind of come from full circle from New Orleans to New York to Houston, and then back here to New Orleans. After Deloitte, I joined the Shaw Group and then Bernard Capital Partners over the last 12 years. And I know some of my former partners yesterday were here at the conference yesterday. We were just really excited about this industry, this sector, and our ability to deploy capital within the group. I spent the last 12 years at Bernard in the private equity space, and in the last 3 to 4 years, we've really been focused on infrastructure, investing, and utility space. And that kind of led to the opportunity that we've seen amongst the utilities is that over the last 30 years, there's really not been much investment in the utility space in terms of generation and load. Electric load has been fairly consistent and not necessarily increasing at levels that existed in the latter half of the 20th century. At the same time, electric utilities have been really focused in on trying to harden and develop the resiliency of their transmission and distribution grids. And now we come to the last few years with the opportunity as load factors starting to increase and projecting forward, a tremendous opportunity for electric utilities to invest in generation. At the same time, their demands for investing in their distribution and transmission assets have never been higher. At the same time, the cheap capital that they had in the credit markets over the last 30 years has dried up. And so that's presented a great opportunity for us to, the integrated electric and gas utilities have chosen to maybe liquidate some of their non-core electric assets and provided private equity firms such as Bernhard to a great opportunity to invest in these LDC businesses. So.
Absolutely. I did a little research last night. So I guess Delta Utilities is the newest utility that's been formed. The first utility that was formed was Baltimore Gas Light in 1817. So quite a gap between, and Baltimore Gas Light became Baltimore Gas and Electric, company I served for many, many years, and still around. And that's kind of the case with many utilities. They were formed 100 plus years ago, and they're still around. This is a new company, and you all are really starting from scratch. New technologies, new people, new systems, and it's a different, and I think a very innovative approach that you're taking. So I'm really eager to learn more about it.
We like to joke that we're the first startup utility since 1930.
Which gives you a long runway in the future, right? You know,
we have no peers.
Yeah, your pension should be, well funded. But so you talked a little about who Delta was and how your organization came to be. How did you end up, and why did you end up in New Orleans?
It's a good question. I mean, Bernhard Capital Partners is a Louisiana-based private equity firm, and the state in our region means a great deal. Obviously, these investments were the legacy Entergy assets that we acquired, and the legacy CenterPoint assets were, located in this region, and that was really a very important aspect of why they were attractive investments. They were in an area where the regulation is very favorable to natural gas and natural gas distribution. That's probably a key criteria to investment. And if we were going to make an investment in this area, then New Orleans seemed like the natural place to do that. We're Louisiana natives, and we've seen too long companies making exodus out of New Orleans. I've been a part of it. I've worked in New Orleans for 8 years and moved to New York, but it was time to form a company and try to reverse that tide and bring people back into New Orleans.
And just for our audience, for background, Delta's closed on 2 acquisitions. The first in April were gas distribution companies from CenterPoint Energy, and then in July you've closed on the sale of the Entergy natural gas properties in Louisiana, and I guess CenterPoint had Mississippi as well.
Yeah, so right now we're serving about 600,000 customers between Louisiana and Mississippi in 5 distinct regulated utilities, 4 that are located in Louisiana and 1 in Mississippi. We have 900 employees approximately, 500 that we inherited and traveled with us from the Entergy acquisition, and 200 that traveled from the CenterPoint acquisition. And we're about the 40th largest solely natural gas regulated utility in the country right now.
So Tim, one more question for you. I mean, you're having to deal with the demands of integration and the closing of the transaction, but as CEO, you're still having to think about a long-term strategy. How do you balance that, and how do you allocate work on your team to keep your eye on both balls, which are equally important?
Yeah, I mean, the transition that we went through really started over 2 years ago when we first announced the acquisition, and going through a regulatory approval that I know Taryn will talk about later. But the first thing we did, even though we're all business people, is we all took the business version of the Hippocratic Oath to do no harm to the customers, right? And so establishing a transition plan that would be as seamless as possible for our customers was the first thing that we had to do. Secondly, we acknowledge that while we have a tremendous amount of assets, pipe in the ground, systems, the biggest and most important and most valuable asset that we have are the 900 people that work for us. So to make sure that their transition was smooth, everyone that was associated in the legacy businesses with these assets had a job, came over to us, plus the people that we hired. So the main thing was stabilize the business and make sure that that transition was as seamless as possible for the customer's perspective. And we look at it in 3 phases: the stabilization, the integration of the business, and then the optimization of the business. And I think that's how we're balancing that. We're finishing up the transition from the stabilization to the integration and really looking to get to one company and think and have all of our people think of that they work for Delta, not they used to work for Entergy, or used to work for CenterPoint, but integrating our operations and then optimizing those as we're going forward. So that's kind of the triangle of forces that we've dealt with along those lines.
So, Jeremy, let me move to you. I've worked with a lot of clients on carve-outs and acquisitions, and you all are doing this in, again, an innovative and a unique way that I don't know has been done a lot. Generally, it's kind of a lift and shift of technology. You take a mirror image of the seller's technology, or you already have your own platform and you're figuring out how to convert the data. You all are building technology from scratch, which in a utility, I mean, there's a lot of technology, right? You've got billing systems, you got obviously ERP and general ledgers, but you've got work management systems and deployment systems, and it's really complex technology. You're building it all from the ground up. Can you talk a little bit about that process?
Yes, not very, probably not done very often because it's pretty difficult to do that out of the gate.
But you can get it right the first time. Right?
Well, I think that's the unique opportunity that we had, and I think that's the exciting part about joining Delta for all of us in the very beginning was we all come from different industries. We've got a very diverse leadership team, a lot of deep natural gas operations, in leadership, but all of us come from different, from M&A to audit to construction. So the first thing that I think we were able to do was, with BCP's guidance, was set up a business without owning any businesses. And so step one was we needed to set up a natural gas utility before we owned natural gas utilities, and we were going through this regulatory process. And particularly because of the Entergy acquisition, there was no TSA, and so that drove us to make decisions probably counter to what most people do, to inherit something, because we weren't granted access to any of those systems at time of the acquisition.
Or the people.
Or the people, that's right. So we were forced to stand up a system, and then after we started that process, we decided to acquire the CenterPoint assets. And similarly, luckily that had a TSA, which bridged the gap a little bit to give us a little more time. But from the offset, our intention was to redefine what it takes to build a natural gas utility. Best practices only, minimize customizations, and we had something that I think a lot of folks didn't have 20 years ago, maybe not even 10 years ago, which was cloud platforms that are significantly more mature today than they were 5-10 years ago. And so we probably took a little bit of a optimistic and somewhat edgy decision to go all in on the cloud and try to do as much as possible to stay within the bounds of the best practices of running a natural gas utility and force-fitting the acquisitions into those best practices so that we sort of future-proof all these major technology investments and let the cloud do what it does, which is become a utility for us. So, you know, to your point, we implemented about 7 major systems simultaneously over the course of a weekend, and we developed them over the course of a year prior through the entire regulatory process. And that included building entire new customer service operations teams. So everyone that answers the phone here in New Orleans just started with the company 5 months ago. We had to transition, to Tim's point, 200 of those folks now. We'll transition the other 500 over the next 6 months. But 200 folks up 30 days in advance of close. We had to implement all new SCADA and operation systems. And it all without, to Tim's point, without access to a significant staff. And so we dealt, you know, again, you're sort of forced to do best practices. And, you know, you do your best to accommodate what the sellers, in this case, Entergy, how they operated their business, and we assimilated those standards in our practices. But we set out from the offset to transform to a different way of running our business. And I think it went off without a hitch. But to Tim's point earlier, one of our creeds early on was do no harm for the customer or to our employees and anyone from a safety perspective. And we were very, very focused on getting the customer side of the equation correct. We did not want any disruption. We didn't want what other acquisitions have experienced in the past, you know, poor customer experiences, you know, bad billing methods. You know, we put a lot of energy in making sure that we got that right. And some of the behind-the-scenes stuff that don't affect customers or safety, we figured we could figure that part out if we had a hiccup, but we could not get that other side incorrect. So I think that's where we focused.
So Taryn, let me get to you. As an M&A attorney, I'm sure you were very comfortable with the contractual negotiations with your sellers and setting up a new entity. But the regulatory side is a different animal, and you had to deal with 3 regulators, right, between Mississippi Public Utility Commission, Louisiana Public Utility Commission, and the City Council of New Orleans. You know, talk about some of those challenges of both getting the transactions approved and then working with them going forward as a regulated utility, and that partnership between your regulators and yourself is so critical to the business success.
Yes, I think it's important to zoom out a bit and understand what took place while we were undergoing these 2 transactions. So unusually and almost unprecedented, we're standing up a new utility, as Jeremy was alluding to, building a new IT systems, hiring people, building a legal department from scratch, HR department from scratch, IT systems from scratch. And at the same time, BCP, following BCP's signing of the Entergy deal, they signed the CenterPoint transaction. So immediately you have to get into regulatory approvals for those 2 processes. And also begin, from M&A perspective, transferring all the assets, carving out the assets of each of those entities simultaneously, CenterPoint and Entergy. And we had an amazing leader in Ryan King, who's our Chief Regulatory Officer, who was able to work with, and you know, in all M&A deals, you have to get regulatory approvals. Usually it's just antitrust approval, but here, because we're transferring utilities, you have to get state regulatory approval from the public service commissions that govern the utilities. In Louisiana, it's the Louisiana Public Service Commission. And Mississippi is the Mississippi Public Service Commission. But in New Orleans, we are regulated by the New Orleans City Council. And it's the only city in the country that regulates a utility where there is a state commission above it. So we set out to get approvals from all three regulators for two different transactions simultaneously. And what this means is, like, for instance, for the CenterPoint transaction, which involves Louisiana and Mississippi customers, they have Louisiana, the LPSC and the MPSC, they have their own processes, timelines, briefings. They want thousands of pages of information and data to confirm that we can service customers, that we can be reliable, that we're going to be safe, that we're going to take over the operations, that we're going to have the capital to put into this, that it's going to be seamless. So they are really getting into the nitty-gritty of our operations to make sure that we're able to service customers. And then we have to go and do the same thing on the Entergy side with the Louisiana Public Service Commission and the New Orleans City Council. And these were very extensive processes, timelines, hearings. Ryan and team and Tim and myself, we had to go in front of the New Orleans City Council. Ryan went in front of the Mississippi Public Service Commission and the Louisiana Public Service Commission several times to approve our strategy. So it was a very extensive process and very successful. We were able to get unanimous approval across all three regulators for all of our utilities within a time span of 14 months, and that is something that is unprecedented and unheard of in this industry.
The key to what we did, is to build on what Taryn said, is that we agreed with all the regulatory bodies to step into the shoes of the legacy businesses. So we were not seeking any rate changes as a result of this transaction. We stepped into the regulatory mechanisms that were in place, throughout Louisiana and Mississippi, and assume that. And we'll file rate cases in due course with the regulatory bodies, but we assume the regimes that were in place. That was key to the transaction.
Well, and compared to other deals, that's a pretty successful outcome. I mean, you don't have any rate credits you had to pass through. I don't think you have a stay-out agreement in any of those jurisdictions.
Nope.
So it's a very positive regulatory outcome for I think, the transaction, which goes to the success of these transactions so far. So, Jeremy, again, I've worked with a lot of utilities, and even with a multi-state utility, you find different working practices and even different systems. In CenterPoint, for instance, Texas versus CenterPoint, Indiana. You're integrating these companies, both from CenterPoint and Entergy. What have been the biggest challenges that you've seen so far in trying to get them aligned?
Culture, people, change management. Those are always the hardest. And regardless of it's a technology transformation, an operational transformation, it's always the same. I think the people, convincing folks that there is a different way. It's different, but it's not detrimental to how they operate is hard. I think it was very challenging in the beginning, but the employees that transferred from Entergy were very well prepared and came in with open minds, understanding that change was amiss. And we worked really, really hard over the course of the year leading up to that transition or the transaction close to get ahead of that with the employees, to prepare them for what was to come. And we were very honest with them that it's not going to be easy. Change is hard. Tools don't always work as you expect, and bugs occur. And at the pace and timeline we operate, I think they were very gracious, and we're very appreciative of their patience as we sort of work through those things. But I think that was probably the largest challenge, and I think with any new business, I think the next phase will be as we start to integrate, standard operating procedures amongst these different utilities. And to your point, I think there's always nuances that will exist between different areas. No one area is alike, and no one scenario is alike. I mean, we work and operate in a city here with a 300-year-old infrastructure, and so New Orleans is a very different place to work and operate. So the safety conditions and the economics are different than rural Louisiana and Mississippi. And so I don't think that we micromanage to that level. We allow our experts to run their businesses, but we have our standards and practices, and we hold ourselves to a pretty high standard. And I think our employees do as well. I mean, that's one of the most impressive things about both of these acquisitions is the level of professionalism that the employees have for their jobs, their duty of responsibility to the citizens of which they serve, They take it serious, and that's important. I think we can't bring that to the table. That's something that's instilled in the core of the culture of the acquisitions. So kudos to Entergy and Centerpoint for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's that's all over the industry. If you ever spend time with field workers, right, whether it's gas pipe workers or linemen, the pride they take in the safety and keeping the lights on, the gas flowing, and the extent they go to extraordinary measures to do that, it's amazing, and I think it's underappreciated.
I mean, we are a regulated utility, and with that comes some privileges, and with that comes a significant amount of obligation and commitment to serve our customers, and making sure that our team really understands and appreciates that. That wasn't something difficult for us to do. It is, like you said, it's kind of permeates through the utility business, in that there's a responsibility that utility workers feel across the board as to what they have to do to maintain the reliability and the resiliency of the service. I know too often in situations of storms and disasters, they take the blunt of a lot of criticism, but it's a difficult job,
Yeah.
Oh.
and they stand by to kind of hold up their end.
So I want to talk a little bit more about the culture aspect and how you align it, but it does occur to me that your businesses have been carved out of big multi-state, multi-commodity companies where perhaps gas LDCs were highly valued, but maybe were not the biggest priority. Your transfer employees must feel good that, hey, we are the priority now. This is our business, and that must give a little bit of a jolt and some energy to as you're putting these businesses together. So, I mean, how are you trying to get the cultures aligned? Are there strategies that you're using?
I mean, absolutely. The Entergy is a phenomenal company. They ran their business very well, but the gas distribution business was 2% of their total
Right.
revenue. So if you're part of that business, you felt like you were a really small cog in
Right.
an organization. So,
And the attention's on electric now because of data center growth and
Right.
other electricity
Or
growth.
if you're
so-
sitting at Centerpoint in
Yeah.
Louisiana and Mississippi, you're not the focal point of Houston or
Right.
Minneapolis or Ohio. So I think there was a tremendous amount of desire for all the traveling employees to really be a part of something new, and they embraced that. And I don't think we really necessarily, as we were going into this, fully expected that. And that was a very pleasant surprise. It's very evident. We had a lot of town halls from day one, from the day that those acquisitions were announced. That feeling really permeated throughout those 700 employees that were traveling. And then the people that we hired here, I think that there's a real entrepreneurship attitude to that we're going to start a business. I don't necessarily know, my roles and responsibilities, whatever they are today, may change tomorrow. And I've got to be able to adapt and focus in on, the needs of the issue of the day. It's not to say that we're just going from fire to fire, but it is a very dynamic and evolving business. And so, I think we've done a good job of building a culture in that, everyone is a much bigger part of a smaller organization, and they take pride in ownership of that. And we're on a journey to get to one operating process and one procedures and one system, and I think all of that's just going to reinforce that process. But Taryn, I don't know if you have thoughts
No,
on that.
yeah, those are excellent points, and I think to build on that, it was so exciting when we would go to the town halls prior to closing, and the employees realizing that we're going to be a core-focused gas utility. That's what we would always say. We're core-focused, like we're focused on gas, we're focused on you. You are now the stars of the show. And they were very excited to see that, because our employees, I mean, they've been so dedicated the past, 20, 30, sometimes even 40 years and servicing gas. And it's a very serious job. And as you said, they take a lot of pride in it. In addition, they're coming from CenterPoint and Entergy, which are two great, sophisticated businesses. But sometimes, they just weren't able to get the support quick enough. And now, because we are focused on them, we are smaller, we're more nimble, we can provide them with services, even like contracts or advice and guidance the day of or the next day. And it's just, the result of being in a bigger company, things take a little bit more time. So I think that's how we were able to shift the focus to them and give them support that they needed to operate.
Well, and there was competition for capital within those companies.
Yes.
You have the capital to bring to them, and I'm sure there are system upgrades and modernization and a lot of things that can be done to improve reliability, to improve safety, improve customer service. How are you all thinking about, I mean, we've talked a lot about bringing the employees together. We've talked about your back office build, but now from a customer perspective, how do you foresee this benefiting your customers?
I think from an operational perspective, our objective is to drive cost out of the business. And I think that some of the modern systems and the modernization efforts that we talk about, while right now we're talking about them in the context of integrating businesses and building back offices and culture, but that's the today issue, the stabilization and integration issue. The real vision and goal of what we've set out to do was to build a gas-focused business, but also build an operating model that is efficient and drives cost out of the business. And a lot of that, frankly, is IT systems. I mean, these IT systems compete for the same capital that is needed to put pipe in the ground or strategic initiatives that the company desires to go after. And so I think that our goal, and it's why we were very stubborn, frankly, on standard processes and adapting to the cloud and living within the constraints that it may introduce, because we knew that once we get there, the cost per customer will be significantly less from that aspect of the business and allow for headroom for more reliability, more expansion of the system if necessary, or whatever other capital requirements exist within the business.
I would build on that and give an illustration, and Casey, based on your background, you'll get all excited about it. But, we look at this, we talk about this a lot internally, that the customer's build is a certain piece of geography, right? It's not our goal. We don't want to expand the size of that build. And how do we grow and operate and make the system safe and reliable without growing the size of the geography and the build? Well, the first thing it does is doing what Jeremy was saying, is let's control our operating costs, let's control our IT spend, and that will give us geographic space within that build to continue to invest in the system reliability, the safety, and components of the assets. At the same time, we've invested in the business, and we've maintained some level of reliability and consistency from a cost perspective to our customers, and frankly, that's important to us.
Yeah, the old model is every dollar of operations and maintenance expenses you can cut gives you $7 of capital to spend on system improvements or IT improvements without an impact on the customer bill. So that's if you can bend that O&M cost curve, it gives you a lot of headroom to make system improvements, which improve service and reliability and all those other things.
But I also think we have, we get intrinsic value out of the cloud by being part of this larger pool of ideas that people are introducing. Instead of having our own monolithic system behind a firewall somewhere that only we have to spend money to do, we're now part of the general population of folks that are coming up with probably, frankly, better ideas than we have. I mean, we turned on a feature, very popular feature out of the gate called Track My Technician. It was something small and, not really a big deal, but it's been,
People love it.
People love it. They took a time frame and you narrow it down, and then you see the vehicle coming to your house, which better predicts and saves you time.
Yep.
And the feedback from customers is unbelievable. And it was such we didn't have to invest in that. It kind of came as a part of the product. And again, that's a particular IT topic, but in other areas, there's similar experiences in other areas and other platforms that we hope to do and hope to be able to leverage others' work by being in that ecosystem, and we'll save money, but we'll also, I think, the customer benefits by getting access to modern tools and modern things as we start to deploy them.
Yeah, that was always the complaint is if FedEx and UPS can tell me where my delivery is, why can't the utility company tell me where my meter reader or my,
Right.
For my Connect is coming? So, and Taryn, obviously, all those things ultimately sometimes require regulatory approval. How is the process rolling out in terms of doing that in multi-states? One of my clients used to tell me the story that when there was a gas interruption and the field worker would go to the person's home and they'd find out that it was a small part that was missing on the other side of the meter. They couldn't fix it, even though they had the part in their toolbox. And they eventually went to the Public Utility Commission and said, can you let us do this? And it would save the customer money, it would get their service back online because you could reconnect them right away. Are those some of the challenges or some of the opportunities you guys are facing from a regulatory perspective to get those concessions?
I think because we built such a great relationship with the regulators during the approval process, we haven't had to face many of those challenges yet. Because we've been in constant contact with them over the past 2 years. And going forward, we will go through 3 rate cases in the very near future.
Well, that's a heavy
Three
lift.
Yeah, it's a
3
very-
rate cases
yes,
at one time.
around the
that'll-
same time.
yeah.
But we have Ryan King leading the way, and he's very good in building his team and what he does, and a great team surrounding him. So we are going to continue to build those relationships with the regulators, and of course, one of the most important parts is showing the benefits to the community, showing our economic impact of the community. These 2 transactions in the next 4 years, we're expected to bring $1.2 billion of total economic impact, another $328 million of labor activity, and 28 or 29 so million dollars of local and tax revenue, which for an economy of this size and for operating pre-existing assets and adding that sort of impact, that really adds to our region. And I think those sort of things help with the helps our relationships with the regulators and make sure that we're able to provide the services such as you mentioned.
So I know the QR codes are out on the screen, and I don't know if any audience questions have come in to our monitors. Anything for our panel?
Yes. Looking beyond the transitions, are there any plans for new gas infrastructure construction, or will transitioning legacy developments be the focus of Delta Utilities?
Well, I think that there's a tremendous opportunity we have now, not only from an acquisition perspective, but also I'm sure our colleagues, I know from the newspaper reports I saw that, Entergy, and it's been very widely publicized, the amount of data center growth here in Louisiana, but also in Mississippi. And so a lot of those data centers are within our service territory, so we are very involved and interested in being able to provide, delivery service, pipeline service to those centers. Those would probably be some combination of regulated and unregulated assets, but they would, in an ideal world, they benefit both of our customers because they provide greater infrastructure for us to serve in redundant capacity and at the same time deliver assets. So I think that those are tremendous opportunities, not just on the electric side of the business, but also on the gas side in our service territory.
Yeah, I mean, I've spent some time in the last week or two with some of the hyperscalers, and they're talking to GE Vernova and Siemens and Mitsubishi and others about turbines, perhaps as backup power on site, mm-hmm. perhaps as a bridge until they can get a grid interconnect. So I think this industrial load growth led by data centers is going to be good for gas as well as electric.
I mean, it's one thing that's important to those developments is the reliability, the resiliency, and the speed to which they come up with.
Speed,
And
yeah.
all of those are very much aligned with what natural gas distribution can provide to them. So, we stand ready to kind of assist in the economic development in the region from that perspective.
Yeah, and one thing we're hearing in the industry is that now the tech industry, they're very, very supportive of gas. And they are all about gas and, making sure they have access to it for their data centers.
Yeah, 3 years ago was a bad word. Now
Yeah,
it's,
now, they're advocates.
Now it's not.
Yes, they are like,
Yeah,
have
now
banners
it's
out
not.
there and everything, yep.
Other audience questions?
Can you share some examples of how you run Delta differently than traditional utilities and how much the size of your company plays a part in that?
I mean, I think one of the things that we talk a lot about that differentiates us from a lot of the normal utilities is that we are completely cloud-based. So our systems are dynamic, they evolve. We're not committed to a system for a 5, 10, 15-year period and then have to invest a significant amount of CapEx from a development perspective. So our technology is evolving on a quarter-to-quarter basis, and I think that our people, from that perspective, will benefit from that. Not only our people, but our customers. And secondly, we're a much smaller organization than our legacy businesses. We touched a little bit on this, and having ownership and the pride of starting the business together. I think that that's something that our teams are very excited about, and we're at the cusp and riding the wave, to go with the whole Tulane thing, riding the wave of that emotion and that benefit.
I think we have time for one more audience question, if there is one.
Sure. How do you ensure that the private equity ownership model, which often has shorter investment horizons, aligns with the very long-lived nature of utility assets?
Not necessarily true from a shorter investment process, right? So the funds that we're investing in are infrastructure funds. They're very, long-lived assets, long-lived funds, and there's a proliferation of continuation vehicles that these assets can be rolled into, very, very prevalent now, that would basically allow them to remain in control of the same kind of private equity family over a very long period of time. So what our investors are really looking for is a long-term infrastructure cash yield investment, and that's no different than the institutional investor that's buying equity in, the largest utility stocks are. So I think our capital structure is really aligned, and the private equity market and or infrastructure market is really evolved and allowed for that to happen. If you'd asked me that question, 10 years ago when we started BCP, I would have said, that's an issue we'd have to deal with, but it is not, really a factor now.
So maybe to follow up, Tim, I think on the equity side, utilities are traditionally around 50% equity to debt. That certainly makes sense, and there are a lot of investors out there that do want to hold a long-term, stable cash flow yield investment. What about on the debt side? Do you see Delta perhaps accessing public debt just to get a little more liquidity, maybe a little more flexibility in the instruments available?
I mean, that could be possible, but we're investment grade. Our 5 utilities are investment grade rated right now. Our holdco on one side of our business is investment grade. So we really kind of have the best of both worlds from that perspective.
There's plenty of bank money out there.
There's plenty of institutional capital, and the private credit markets are growing, exponentially.
No doubt. Well, I can't thank you all enough for this discussion. It's as a long-time utility, somebody that services the utilities for a long time, it's kind of cool to see something being built from the ground up, and all the things you're talking about, moving to the cloud. the legacy companies want to do it, but they have these old systems that, number one, it's hard to make that conversion, and they've got to change all their working practices. So in many ways, you're leapfrogging and getting ahead of the game, which it's going to be fascinating to watch, and I think very, very beneficial. So I guess if I can ask our audience to please thank them for their comments and for their sponsorship of the event.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this session. Our next session in this space will be a global energy magnet, what LNG reveals about Louisiana's
yes.
advantage, which is scheduled to start at 11:15.